In this episode, part 2 of our session with our Uncle Tony, we talk about how he helped take down big tobacco in federal court. Smoking was everywhere. Restaurants, bathrooms, buses, planes, and even in doctors' waiting rooms. Women were encouraged to smoke to keep their weight down. Pregnant women were told to smoke to keep their children's birth weight down.
Low birth weight was so true for Gen Xers. When I was talking about this in dispatch, my coworker Tina, who is going to be on our future podcast, mentioned that she was 4 pounds 8 ounces when she was born because her mom smoked, just like she was told to. My mom told stories about her pregnancies in the 60s, where she was told to smoke regularly while pregnant to help keep her birth weight down and the size of her baby more manageable. When she's wheeled into the prep room before her actual birthing process, her nurse was smoking a cigarette and didn't even wash her hands afterwards. Our Uncle Tony took on big tobacco industries in 2001, which led him to testify in federal court finally in 2005. Russell Kinner of the U.S. Department of Justice asked Tony to be the expert witness taking his decades of youth and adolescence research to go up against big tobacco. He at first had hesitated because he knew other people also were experts in this area and seemed like maybe they would be the better choice. However, he was convinced by Russell Kinner, and with the help of others who had testified before him, he went on to realize that he had to testify because he knew how outrageously harmful tobacco marketing really was. In Tony Biglan's article, How Cigarette Marketing Killed 20 Million People, I found an amazing quote where he writes, "The major competitor of Philip Morris during the second half of the 20th century was R.J. Reynolds, makers of Camel cigarettes, among others. They too realized that if they did not get teens to smoke their brand, they would lose market share." I know one of my most favorite memories of your professional life was when you were testifying in front of Congress.
The court.
The court.
Yeah.
Okay, so was it the Supreme Court?
No. It was a federal court.
Federal court.
And it was in Washington, D.C. It was U.S. versus Philip Morris et al. So it was a lawsuit by the federal government against all of the tobacco companies for their marketing of cigarettes. And I was asked to be an expert witness in the marketing to kids. And so that proceeded to involve, I worked on that for 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they sent, they said, you have to come and get these documents. So I sent 2 people who worked for me to Washington, and they came back with documents that would fill half of this room.
Wow.
And we had to plow through those documents, and those were not the only documents. And so...
would they be documents from like the tobacco companies countering your points?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, wow. How does one even organize all of that?
Well,
That's mind-boggling.
I started by writing a report to the Justice Department. And then there was a deposition where tobacco company lawyers came to Eugene and went to the, what's the one on the river, the hotel?
Yeah, the Valley River
Valley
Inn.
River Inn, right. So we got this long, narrow room and a table that's about 4 times the length of this table.
So like
and
20
I'm
feet.
seated at one end and the videographer's at the other end. And around the table are about 8 tobacco company lawyers and 1 lawyer from the Justice Department. So this is and I've never done a deposition before.
Oh my
right?
God.
And so they deposed me, and it was 19 hours over 2 days, and it took me a week to recover from it.
19 hours?
Well, it turns out that federal rules of procedure is that you have to, you cannot depose a witness for more than 7 hours in one day. And the guy, Russell Kinner from the Justice Department, didn't tell me that. And we actually got to be friends. I told him I was going to sue him over the
my 19
distress.
hours, yeah.
But, I mean, it was grueling. It was like, you just don't know what they're going to ask. And it's designed, and they put on this false politeness. Now, Dr. Biglan, are you comfortable? Did you want to take a break?
Oh, whoops! Am I giving you flashbacks?
So, I mean, at one point, but they're trying to get under your skin, and they're videoing this because they want to use it against me. And in fact, they ended up trying to bring some of this in when I finally got on the stand a year later to try and undermine my testimony, but the judge would have none of it.
Oh, good.
But so at one point, one of the lawyers says, "So, Dr. Biglan, who's Catherine Madden?" And it's like, that immediately, Catherine Madden was in charge of the Institutional Review Board for Oregon Research Institute, an employee. But where is he going with this?
Right.
You know, and he was trying to get at the credibility of ORI or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember that they were arguing that I had said that the reason the kids smoke is because of parents and peers. And I had published some stuff on that. And they are factors that are associated with kids starting to smoke. But you've never said anything about advertising. Well, actually, I had. And they said, "Oh, really? Well, we'd like you to bring to us the data, the things you've published on this." So after 10 or 12 hours of the testimony this first day, I have to go home and find this stuff, right?
Oh, boy.
So
Without Google?
well, I had a glass of gin. And and I had published things.
Oh, yeah,
In fact,
absolutely.
I published a book that included a chapter on this. So, but
A book. Well, I'm not sure if that's published, Dr. Biglan.
well, those are the kinds of things they did. So I did 2 additional depositions, both of which were in Washington, and but this time there was a different lawyer who was from the Justice Department, and she said it was 7 hours and that was it. And then by then, I had learned that I shouldn't argue with them. I should just answer the question as briefly as possible. But you get to the end, so we're like 6 hours into this, and I realized that it's 7 hours and I can run out the clock.
You're playing the football lane here.
So I start expanding, and they're looking at their watches and so on. It was great fun.
You could just throw data after data and studies.
But I was a nervous wreck.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'd be terrifying. Yeah, because I've actually learned about this before.
Yeah, what year was the tobacco trials?
I think the trial was finally in 2005.
Oh my gosh! But you were 2 years before that.
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah, and I was so angry at the Justice Department lawyers. Not Russell Kinner, but there were these 2 women, and actually 3 interesting people. And the Justice Department lawyers don't get paid anything like. I mean, the lawyers we were up against are getting paid $1,000 an hour.
Oh, so your 19 hours, each one of them got.
Well, I was getting paid $500 an hour, so there were rewards for this.
Thank goodness.
But it was there are a bunch of stories to tell, but the Justice Department lawyers would get angry with me because I wasn't angry at the tobacco company lawyers, and they were just so difficult. I had to write my testimony. Most of my testimony was written testimony, which was nice, but we're getting close to the deadline for this. I'm supposed to go to Washington, and I'm going to be there for a week and testify after a week of preparation in Washington with them. And just writing the testimony, which we needed to get to the defense before I go to Washington, and they're sending corrections. and one of them sending corrections to change this way. And then the other one they broke our fax machine sending us stuff. And they, it is so difficult. And so I get there and we spend a week and they say, well, okay, we're going to take you through a mock, thing. But they kept putting it off. So finally, on Friday afternoon, I'm going to testify on Monday. They're going to start doing this and say, okay, we're not going to have any interruptions. We're just going to go through this. They get into an argument, and it just ended. We never really. I mean, I'm at this place with like
practice.
This, practice and so on. And I start, and oh no, you don't. And the two of them start arguing about whether or not it should be this way or that way. I was so angry and so distressed. I called Kathy, my sister, who is a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I said, come, and she was in Texas. I said, come up here.
I need you.
Yes, and she did. And I allowed myself one gin drink every night on this.
To keep yourself.
Right, but not be hungover the next day, right? So, and they'd actually had me come in December, and this was in January that I testified, but they had me come to observe this, right? Mm-hmm. And so they had this guy who was an expert for the Justice Department talking about some aspect of marketing of cigarettes himself, and they just tore him apart, and it was just terrible. And I have had I used to get anxious in in teaching
mm-hmm.
in classrooms, right? And before I would go I'd be in the bathroom,
mm-hmm.
and that plagued me for 25, 30 years.
Anxiety.
Anxiety,
bathroom
public
anxiety,
speaking.
Yeah.
But associated with going to the bathroom. I mean, I got a real problem.
I'm with you.
I understand that feeling as well.
I think we're all with you.
So I'm watching this guy testify, and I'm going, oh my God. So the day before I testified, I ate very little at all, and I had gone to my physician to get Lomodal.
Oh yes,
and took that as well. So I survived. So I get on the stand, and I'm answering these questions, and I was supposed to. I had slides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turned out I thought I was going to have the week to work on those slides. They said, no, you need to send the slides in. So the defense had the slides a week in advance. And so I didn't have a way to change them. I had planned to edit them and so on. So they had my slides. And the slides were about the ways in which, especially that young people were being advertised to. So they take the statements I've made and they start putting them up on this Velcro thing and say, now, Dr. Biglan, isn't it the case? And it was all about whether they were marketing to young people, because I said that the marketing was designed to sell tobacco on the basis of desires that young people had.
Like Joe Camel. I remember you specifically asking, do you think Joe Camel is a cartoon that would be appealing to juveniles? Absolutely. I don't even think Gabe knows what Joe Camel is.
I do.
Do you?
I do,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, in fact,
I've seen the old ads for a lot of tobacco commercials.
Well, the amazing thing about it is I have read all of the research documents of R.J. Reynolds that made Camels,
mm-hmm.
and Philip Morris that made Marlboro, right?
Yeah.
Marlboro was a woman's cigarette in the 1950s.
Yeah, I do know that, yeah.
And they turned it into a men's cigarette. Right. And I became a fan because they were advertised the New York Giants, which was my favorite football team. So they got control of the youth market in the 1950s, and they had complete control of that market. And R.J. Reynolds came up with the Bob Somebody campaign, and it was a Studley guy and so on. That didn't work. Then they had another Studley guy, and that didn't work. And it was only when they finally came up with the Joe Camel that they got a blip, and they started competing. And when they started succeeding, then Philip Morris did some focus groups about the Marlboro Man and Remember the Puppies, because they realized that they needed to have a sort of a more warm aspect to the Marlboro Man.
Cute and fluffy. And yeah.
Exactly. And so here are these guys playing with these puppies, right?
I forgot about the puppies.
And I will tell you, I was a definite admirer of the Philip Morris ads, because the Marlboro ads, I mean, beautiful photography and
cowboys and horses
and being tough and rugged and popular and so on.
And 100% marketed to children.
and what Camel got was both the cartoon aspect, but I mean, you should read what the focus group of kids, people over 21, said, well, he's a man's man, and they just love it. And talking about Joe Camel like he was a real person. I mean, that really worked.
I remember the merchandise because there was.
I still have the merchandise.
Do you? The hats and the.
As a matter of fact, I will give you the yellow camel jacket if you promise not to wear it in public.
Didn't they ended up making a lot of money off the merchandising for Joe Camel, right?
The purpose of the merchandising was more to sell the product. But yes,
I remember they ended up actually making like a huge profit off just their merchandising.
I think
No, because I remember talking to. I think I did a paper on this in school.
Okay.
I don't know, because this is all sounding very familiar to me.
Yeah. I know that Joe Camel, because this is back when I smoked. If you bought a carton of cigarettes, which I could never afford a carton. When I smoked, I couldn't afford that. But if you did, you could get a free hat.
Yeah.
Or if you bought, two somethings, then you could get the cup. There was a cup. There was.
Yes.
I mean, there was.
I can't remember if I think I threw some of that out because I was just in my office
cleaning
at ORI.
Things out. Yeah.
But
I can't imagine how much you do.
I took that stuff to my first deposition, and it was in the car, and I could show you this stuff. I was arguing with them and so on. It was crazy. But what was so funny was that Philip Morris. Anyway, so back to my testimony.
Back to your Velcro statements.
So he's putting up this stuff, and I social acceptance and sexual attraction and ruggedness and so on. And I was saying that these are all qualities that are designed to appeal to people, to young people, right?
Yeah.
And so he's saying, now, Dr. Biglan, isn't it the case that people over 21 also have those? And I'm going, well, yeah, but not to the same extent. But, and I don't know exactly where he's going with this. Mm-hmm. But he is asking this question about all of these different motivational aspects. And I finally figure out where he's going with this. And the guy's name was Bernick, and he was a small guy, and the Justice Department lawyers hated him. And so he's taken me through all of this. And there was no jury, by the way. This was just a judge. And so he finally gets to one and he says, and isn't it true that this is for people 21? And I said, yes. And that's exactly why you can do marketing research with people over 21 and be confident that if it works for them, it'll work for people under 18.
Oh.
And he went, like this.
Checkmate, my friend.
Well, actually, Steve Martin comes into this. I wrote an essay about this, which I couldn't get into this book because it was too long.
Oh.
So Steve Martin in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels again.
Love this.
Okay.
Love this movie.
All right. So remember when Dr. Schaffhausen comes up to examine his legs?
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. And so he's sitting in the wheelchair, and Dr. Schaffhausen pinches his leg. And in the way only Steve Martin can do, Steve Martin goes, do you feel anything? He said, no. And the tear comes down his eye, that he can't feel anything, right? And so Dr. Schaffhausen goes across the room and pulls out this switch, and he comes running at him and hits him as hard as, and Steve Martin goes, no.
More tears.
And I realized that my job as a witness was to be Steve Martin. I had a colorful way of talking about it, but it's too obscene for me to share it with you on the recording. But it's like And now, Dr. Biglan, isn't it the fact that you know, and whatever they throw at me, I say, I don't recall that. And so I had gotten to that.
You got to your Steve Martin Zen.
Right. But Bernick had not gone to the Steve Martin school. And he just gave away to the judge that he'd lost the argument. I couldn't believe it.
Did Kathy get to witness this moment? Or?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Right.
I wish it was like live video feed, you know, like.
Well, and you know, I was on the stand most of one day. And so at the end of that day, they said, well, you know, how much time, the judge says, how much time you're going to need tomorrow. And like 6 different lawyers said, you know, and it's going to be like 5 hours or something that I'm going to be on. And I'm going, oh my God. Well, the next day I was on for like half an hour and they ended. And that was because they weren't getting anywhere with me. And when I got off, one of the lawyers said, you did a really good job.
Yes.
So,
You always know when you're doing well when they don't ask you back.
yes. And the judge accepted all of my opinions.
Oh, well, I'm sure.
So,
Yeah. Can you?
That's pretty damaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but here's the problem.
Okay.
Yep.
They were prosecuted under the RICO statutes, right? Mm-hmm. The fraud, wire, you know, the use of the wire to, you know, to defraud the public. The issue of how much money damages they should have to pay went up to an appellate court. Both sides agreed that it could go up to appellate court before the trial was over. Before the trial was over, the appellate court had said that under that statute, they could only be told to stop doing what they had been doing for 50 years, which contributed to the death of something like 20 million Americans.
Yep.
Wow.
And that's the problem with the RICO statutes. And if you read Rebooting Capitalism, I'll tell you all the details of why we don't regulate corporations because of the advocacy for free market economics.
Oh, I'm already like above my head. Now, okay, I'm gonna have to read that part.
Picking up a little bit of that, but yeah.
Yeah, I got parts, but that's amazing. So that was your. Would you ever testify like that again?
I thought not.
Oh, and yet, dot.
But I got a call from a guy in Texas, a lawyer, and he had a case that he had won in Massachusetts against Lorillard and the way that they had marketed to a young person. And he had 2 cases in the Virgin Islands. It turns out the Virgin Islands is the U.S. Virgin Islands
right.
is part of the Northeast judicial
like appellate courts and
district.
okay. District court.
I don't know why. So I was asked to testify in that.
Oh.
And it was bizarre. So I go to the Virgin Islands, and I'm going to be the first person to testify. And it was 2 cases. And one of the cases was a woman who, at the age of 16, both of them were people who grew up in the Virgin Islands, and a white girl at age of 16 who started smoking. And she started smoking because, and eventually died of lung cancer due to her smoking. And she got into Newports because they had all of these tropical scenes from that area and so on, and because it showed that if you smoked Newports, you could be a chick magnet, is what they were, right? So that was what got her into it. The other one was a black man who, at age of 9, his mother was working in the Bronx, I think, and he went up there to live with her. She was already there, and they lived in an apartment house that had about 15 apartments, and Lorillard was giving out free samples, 4 packs, and other things, and they put them on all the doorknobs. Well, he would go around and take them all down, and he was stashing the cigarettes away, and at 9 years old he became addicted to Newport cigarettes.
Damn.
I remember there was some...
I forgot about that. They gave out free samples.
Yeah, I remember they came in the mail one time. They were very thin, I don't even know what they're called, but the super skinny like Virginia Slims but thinner,
Right.
came in the mail.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
now it seems
free samples. Right.
crazy that we would have that conversation.
Well, I mean, the efforts to control smoking have been, a 50-year task, and we still have ways to go, because, and in fact, we're behind places like Australia. You should see what they've done. I was also an expert for them, although I never ended up having to testify. But so it turns out that the prosecution or the plaintiffs, I'm on their side, and the defense agree that there can be parts of the trial against Lorillard that are across both people, and so they had two juries, both of them all black, and so for parts of it they'd both be there, but then for parts that were just about the one person, the other jury would go out.
Okay.
Right.
Confusing.
And the bizarre thing is, I mean, it's like really hot in the Virgin Islands. And this is in a courtroom that's freezing. I'm shivering in this courtroom, and they could not control it. This had been true apparently for a long, long time.
So you're in parkas in
Yes.
Virgin Islands.
So,
Wool socks, wool
Right.
wool suits.
so anyway, I testified, and I testified over 2 days. And I thought I was done the first day, and it wasn't, and I have to go back. And so I went to this restaurant, and I ordered some gin, and I had too much gin. And when I got up, I was like shaky. So I got a taxi, and I go back to the hotel, and I just got in the swimming pool and started swimming. And even when I was done swimming, I was still shaky, and I had trouble getting to sleep. It was terrible. And in fact, I ended up calling Georgia, just, to get some comfort.
Right.
Didn't get a lot of sleep. I went back and testified. And anyway, I made do. So anyway, it went to, after I left, the juries, the trials ended, and the juries ruled. And so one of the plaintiffs got $1 million.
Wow.
And the other plaintiff got $70 million.
Whoa.
Who do I have to guess?
Oh, I always ask people to guess.
No. What are you gonna go? I'll let you vote.
All black juries.
God, I would hope.
Probably the woman who died of lung cancer.
Oh yeah, did the guy that started at 9, was he still alive?
No, they were both
they're
dead.
both dead. Okay, so you're gonna say the woman
Yeah,
got
the family of the woman,
got the 90 million,
70 million.
70 million. I don't know why 90, 70 million.
Oh.
I would hope it went the other way. That it was the.
Almost everybody guesses the woman, and that's correct.
Oh gosh, I was so
woman.
Isn't that
hoping.
amazing?
It's the
I was-
woman factor.
Is it the woman factor or the race factor?
Well, no,
Or
because
both?
all black juries are more impartial. This
I
is a
don't-
fact.
Is it a fact?
Mhm.
I don't know.
The more black people you have on a jury, the more impartial a jury will be.
Gosh, that's interesting.
Oh, give me a citation on that. That's
Right? Let's
interesting.
find
Well,
that.
that citation is, yeah.
You have to Google.
Oh,
Where's the Google?
no, you can't get away with that.
See, Tony's
All
in
my-
the room.
No,
Do you know where
I
the research for
understand
this
that,
came
but
from? The research for this came from Google. Everything I learned.
Right.
is
I
from
love that
Google.
section
Right.
where you're talking about
Yeah.
the companies go
Yes.
to Amazon and you're
Right.
like, as I Google,
yeah, no, it's just.
I would
I
hope.
think it was from. I forget what it was from, but
Well,
I-
sensitivity to fairness, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
for
well, because
sure.
it's
Right.
it's like it's the idea that the more that you are downtrodden, the more that you'll like to see everything
Yes.
for the facts
Yes.
that it's in context of.
Because you're much
Right.
closer to the
Yeah.
actual
Well, it's like
situation.
that study that showed that money and empathy are direct inverse of each
Yeah.
other,
Oh, yes.
That-
yes.
which is like, yeah, it's like it checks that box of like, yeah, makes sense. Like,
It's so that study keeps
Well-
coming up in
Well, there's
circles.
a reason for that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, because if I'm your servant, I have to be concerned about what you like, right? If you don't have to care. I mean, you can just fire me, right?
I can go hire another you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that I think that's a study that we kind of talk about at work and bant about, like how much money is enough money? Like what is that, is it worth working specifically because you have no, like you want to work 20 hours of overtime a week? Is it really worth that? Where's the balance between how much money you make and?
I think you have to have so much money that there's just no way you could ever.
There's apparently a golden number in that study.
Well, actually, there is, and it's in Rebooting Capitalism.
Yeah, there you go. I'll read it.
A Nobel Prize winning economist studied this, and actually, it turns out that for certain aspects of well-being, if you get much above $70,000 a year, there's not an increment.
Yep.
That's about what you need. But the other thing I argue in Rebooting Capitalism is that what has been promoted since 1970, since Lewis Powell's memo, which I talk about in there, what has been promoted is the idea that if I pursue my own wealth, it'll benefit everybody. That's the invisible hand notion of Adam Smith. And there's some truth to that. I mean, if you don't think market forces affect things, then hand in your cell phone, because cell phones wouldn't exist without the competition in markets that, got people to come up with a better product.
Right.
But it's not always the case. But what has happened is that advocacy has moved people toward the belief that they have to have more, and that and that I'm better than you if I have more than you. And so it has undermined support for poor people. It's undermined egalitarianism. In the first half of the 20th century, we had an increasing level of cooperation among people. By the time that we got through the Second World War and into the 1950s, we had the most middle-class nation of any. And it was because of solidarity and so on. That started breaking down in 1970 when Lewis Powell wrote his memo.
So we might want to look at wrapping it up. This one's
it's a good one though.
Yeah.
Are you going to break this up into two? Or
that's what I was actually thinking.
I think so, because I think one is very distinctly like the about your actions and communities and juvenile justice, and then this whole other part is about the tobacco industries, and
it's very fascinating.
It is.
So let me give you some pitches.
Yes, pitch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have about 200 people who've joined Values to Action, and many of them have volunteered to work on action circles. We've done action circles on how to reform juvenile justice, on how to get better behavioral health for kids with developmental disabilities who do not get good treatment very often in hospitals and clinics because people don't know how to handle their distressed behavior and so on. We have developed an approach to making sure that every child learns to read, which we're working with schools on how to do that, and we have good evidence that will work. We're working on reducing conflict in communities, and in fact, and we're actually making some progress on that. We are working on climate change and sustainability in communities. We're working on helping to implement the PAC's Good Behavior Game and doing some evaluation of that in special education classrooms. We are working on the PAC's tools, which are kernels that we're teaching parents how to use those, and doing some evaluation on that. We're working with the African refugee community in Oregon on the trauma that they've experienced, which there's good evidence that the acceptance approach can be helpful to them. We're also working with them on families and so on. We are available to communities that want to address any of those problems or any other problems, because we have a system now where we're getting people to come together around a shared vision. Did I tell you that the shared vision is, if this were the most wonderful community you could imagine being in, what would you see, hear, feel, and do more of? And we've got about 100 people who've done it in Newberg, Oregon, where if you look at that word cloud that makes, it's things like listening and caring and music and laughter and compassion and things of that sort. and people on opposite sides of political issues come together. Nobody's going to win the culture wars, but we can bring people together around caring and compassion and so on, and that's what we're working on. So those are things, and if people want to give money to Values to Action, we can use it.
.org.
If people want to join Values to Action, you can join for $47, and we can put them to work on a specific issue that they want to work on, or they can just
Join a group already
be part of it. And people should buy Rebooting Capitalism
and the Nurture Effect.
And you can get them at valuestoaction.org. And this book has not gotten as much attention as it should. And I haven't worked really hard to promote it, but I'm confident that that is an accurate explanation of how we got to this terrible situations we're in and what we can do about it.
Absolutely.
I'll have to give it a read then. For sure.
It's real, and what is nice about it is the way that it's laid out. If there's a particular section, which is what I did, I sort of started at the beginning, and then I was like, well, there's this. I want to see the justice part, and then the next thing I know, I'm like, well, now I want to see the, the next section on making society more nurturing. And so there was just, I ended up sort of
bouncing around.
Yeah, I sort of skipped right around, and then of course in the back is all the studies, and so I keep highlighting like, oh yeah, I want to look at this one, and I want to look at this one.
Well, I have most of those. If you want copies of them, let me know.
Well, good old Google.
Okay, so I've got
you got the plug.
I plugged the books. I plugged Values to Action. I think I'm done.
You're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's
been very fascinating.
Absolutely. We could go for hours. You might have to be pressed into more.
Well, okay, so if I understand what you're up to, you are trying to create a radio station, basically.
Yes.
That reaches people about ways in which we can make basically our societies more nurturing, right?
And help ourselves, which in effect helps our family, which in effect helps our community.
Exactly. And so we are allies in that
Absolutely.
effort.
100%,
and we should think about that going forward.
I want to put this on here so I remember. Victoria Doyle was just elected to the city council, and so she's a person that she's a forward thinker.
Is this the Springfield?
Yes,
okay.
I really would like to. I want to reach this out to her.
Oh, you want to get her on here?
Well, actually, that'd be cool too. But I would like to talk to her and get her.
Well, and I'm happy to talk to any group that wants to listen to me.
Excellent, because that might be another thing.
And I do have some videos on valuestoaction.org. But the other thing is, if you want to take a pinpointed issue, I can probably find you a behavioral scientist. They're not all in Oregon, but I can probably find you experts.
That we can, like, if we have an issue, we all agree, and this is what we're going to focus on. Yeah. I would like to see, one of our issues that we're kind of deal with is that we're always short-handed, that we just don't have enough people to do the work we already have. So trying to figure out
how to get the new generation interested in being a police officer.
And dispatcher, and
all the roles.
And all of those things require effort. So.
And by the way, when it comes to family interventions, there are in Oregon Marian Forgach and Beth Stormshack and Carol Metzler and Liz Scourin are 4 experts on family interventions that are in Eugene.
Wow. So, okay. I want to get these. I need cahoots too, just to keep a list of people.
You're going to have a lot of notes on this one.
I am. I'm going to have to, and I probably will have to do like specific ones to send to specific people, because there's some highlights that are really important. But thank you.
Oh, and we can also help people with action circles and setting up action circles to get anything done.
Through your actions. Your valuestoaction.org, right?
Valuestoaction.org. Yep. Okay.
That's the one. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. We, from Echo of Connections, would like to thank our Uncle Tony for sharing with us the stresses from the federal trial, because industries like tobacco and alcohol will prey on weaknesses. We found Tony's knowledge on the trial a fascinating look on the corporate greed of profit over people. How does taking on big tobacco show resilience? Tony had to stand up to $1,000 an hour lawyers trying to destroy his life's work. He reached out to his sister and wife for help when he needed the extra boost. We call that a great example of resiliency. Tony has dedicated his life to learning why and how we behave. Tony talks about his experience taking on big tobacco, to taking on community conflicts, children reading, the African refugee crisis, and shared vision goals to change where we live and how we connect better. No one will win the culture wars. Bringing people together is his way to go forward. Check out his books at valuestooaction.org, Rebooting Capitalism, and The Nurture Effect.
Thank you for listening to Echo of Connections. You can find us on Audible on Amazon, Spotify, our YouTube channel, iTunes, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcast. You can check out behind the scenes, bio of our guests, and blog entries on our website at echoofconnections.com. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.